The commentator laughed, not because anything about it was funny. He laughed because there was genuinely nothing else left to do. The moment that VAR line appeared on the screen inside Miami Stadium on Saturday night, and the tip of Davinson Sanchez's right boot was shown to be fractionally ahead of the last Portuguese defender. Stu Holden, a former United States international, a man who has watched thousands of football matches in his life, let out a disbelieving laugh on live television and reached for the only words that actually made sense to him in that moment. He was offside, Holden said, by a toenail. That was it. That was the entire margin. The difference between a Colombian victory and a goalless draw. Between a story of triumph and a story of what might have been. And in that single, involuntary moment of stunned amusement from one of the most experienced voices in the broadcast booth, something crystallized about this World Cup that football fans around the world had been feeling for weeks, but struggling to properly put into words. The technology is right. And the technology is also, somehow, breaking something. Let's start with what actually happened in Miami, because it needs to be understood in full. Colombia arrived at their final Group K match against Portugal, needing only a draw to confirm top spot. Portugal needed a win. On paper, this looked like a match with deeply imbalanced stakes, one team able to play for security, the other forced to chase. In reality, what unfolded at Miami Stadium was 90 minutes of football so entertaining, so competitive on both sides, so packed with quality and tension, that it has already been described as one of the great goalless draws in the history of this tournament, the first time Colombia had ever failed to score in a World Cup match. Matt Damon watched from the stands. John Leguizamo was there too, and neither of them, nor the tens of millions watching on screens around the world, could have predicted that the defining moment of this match would arrive not from Cristiano Ronaldo, not from James Rodriguez, not from any of the world-class attacking talent spread across both squads. It would arrive from Davinson Sánchez, Colombia's central defender. Rising to meet a corner kick deep into stoppage time, the delivery was excellent, the run was perfectly timed, the header was authoritative, driven downward into the corner with the technique of a player who has spent a career making exactly this kind of contribution in exactly this kind of moment, at Tottenham Hotspur, at Galatasaray, and now on football's biggest possible stage, against one of this tournament's most celebrated teams. The net moved, the stadium erupted. The assistant referee's flag went up almost immediately. The match stopped for a VAR review. Referee Alireza Fagani eventually signaled that the original on-field call had been correct. The replay, when Fox's broadcast finally showed it, displayed the tip of Sanchez's right boot fractionally over the line, ahead of the last defender at the exact moment the corner was delivered. The goal was disallowed. On commentary, play-by-play voice John Strong confirmed, fairly, that the officials had made the technically correct decision by the precise letter of the law. Beside him, Stu Holden laughed again, the laugh of a football man confronting a contradiction his own sport has not yet figured out how to resolve. Because here is the contradiction, laid out plainly. The offside law was never written to catch toenails. It was written to prevent goal hanging, to stop attacking players from camping behind the last line of defense, waiting for a ball played over the top, gaining an unearned advantage over the goalkeeper that turned scoring into something closer to an unfair shortcut than a genuine athletic achievement. That is the specific problem the law was designed to solve. A central defender throwing his entire body into a header from a corner kick, every muscle committed to the effort of connecting with the ball before the goalkeeper can reach it, is not goal hanging. The position of his toe provided him no advantage over Portugal's goalkeeper. It offered no head start, no shortcut to glory. It was simply the natural physical consequence of a powerfully built professional athlete attacking a set-piece delivery at full stretch and landing his foot a matter of centimeters further forward than the technology is now calibrated to permit. There is a proposal that has been circulating quietly among football's governance and rulemaking community for some time now. It is sometimes called a daylight standard. The principle behind it is simple. For an offside to actually be called, a player's body would need to be visibly, clearly, unambiguously ahead of the defensive line, not by a margin only a computer can detect, but by a gap an ordinary observer could see clearly with their own eyes, in real time, without a single replay. The marginal millimeter, the armpit offside, the shoulder offside, the toe offside. Under a daylight standard, none of those would be enough on their own to disallow a goal. None of these proposed changes are currently in place. And so, under the rules as they exist today, Sanchez's goal does not stand and never will. But step back for a moment from this one specific moment of bad luck and look at the bigger picture of Colombia's entire group stage campaign. Because the VAR story of this squad, across these 3 matches, is one the rest of this tournament cannot simply ignore. This disallowed goal against Portugal was the 4th goal taken away from Colombia across their group stage campaign. Earlier in the group, 3 separate goals were disallowed in their match against DR Congo. One ruled out for offside early in the move, another wiped out for a foul identified deep in the build-up, a third disallowed late in the match, also for offside. 4 goals, across 2 matches, removed by the very technology that was introduced specifically to make this sport fairer. And yet Colombia stand today as Group K winners. 7 points, 2 wins and a draw. Copa America champions who have, statistically and visually, outplayed every single opponent they have faced at this World Cup so far, and who now enter the round of 32 as one of the most technically impressive sides still competing in this tournament. They did all of that despite what was taken from them, and that in itself is a statement. The match in Miami that the scoreboard eventually recorded as a goalless draw was never really a draw in any footballing sense. Colombia created chances worth an expected goals total of 1.63. Portugal, carrying Cristiano Ronaldo, 41 years old, making his 25th World Cup appearance, the most decorated player in the history of this entire competition, managed an expected goals total of just 0.69. Ronaldo himself finished the night with 3 shots and 43 touches across 90 minutes. Colombia's pressing system, designed and executed with forensic precision by manager Nestor Lorenzo, rendered one of the greatest players in the history of this sport almost completely ineffective for an entire match. What actually kept Portugal level on the night was not their own attacking football. It was a single, extraordinary individual performance from goalkeeper Diogo Costa, who finished the match with 6 crucial saves against a Colombian attack that, by almost any reasonable measure, deserved to have scored at least once before stoppage time ever arrived. And yet the single detail that will define this match, the one that will be replayed and discussed long after the underlying statistics have been forgotten by almost everyone, is a Fox Sports commentator laughing in disbelief on air, and a phrase that had already spread across social media before the 2 teams had even finished shaking hands at the final whistle. A toenail. That was it. That was the entire story, reduced to 3 syllables that millions of people understood instantly. The broader conversation about football's increasingly fragile relationship with its own officiating technology has been steadily building across this entire tournament, match by match. Brazil filed a formal complaint with FIFA after a Vinicius Jr. goal was disallowed against Scotland, a story we have already told you in full. Ghana watched legitimate penalty claims waved away by a VAR team the referee chose not to consult. Iran had 2 significant goals disallowed across their own campaign. Uzbekistan's forward struck what would have been one of the great individual goals of this entire World Cup, only to lose it to a video review of a build-up challenge that the naked eye could barely even detect on first viewing. This pattern is not a coincidence. Semi-automated offside technology, VAR interventions reaching back into build-up phases of play, and the human judgment still required to determine which specific challenges even meet the threshold for review in the first place. Together, they have created a tournament where the relationship between the football actually being played on the pitch and the scoreline it eventually produces feels more fragile than any expansion to 48 teams was ever supposed to allow. James Rodriguez, who paused at halftime for a brief, friendly conversation with his old Real Madrid teammate Cristiano Ronaldo on the way back to the tunnel, the way former colleagues from the same dressing room always seem to, became on Saturday night the first Colombian player ever to reach 11 World Cup appearances. He created 5 clear-cut scoring chances. He completed more passes in the final third than any other player on the pitch. By almost every available measure, he was the single best player at Miami Stadium that night, and he walked away from the match without a goal, without an assist, with a 4th disallowed goal now sitting permanently in the official record of his team's group stage campaign. Colombia now face Ghana in Kansas City in the round of 32. Ghana's manager is Carlos Queiroz, the same Carlos Queiroz who had a difficult, short-lived spell in charge of the Colombian national team between 2019 and 2020, a period neither party particularly enjoys revisiting. That shared history between the man and the nation will add its own layer of tension to a match that the football alone would already make genuinely compelling. But before the knockout rounds properly arrive, the question that Colombia's entire group stage has placed firmly on the table deserves a real answer. One that football's lawmakers have, so far, consistently failed to provide. At what point does technology stop serving this sport and start quietly overruling it instead? Stu Holden's laughter is still echoing across social media tonight, and somewhere in Miami, Davinson Sánchez is almost certainly still looking at a photograph of his own right boot, wondering exactly the same thing. So tell me what you think. Was this the correct, fair application of the laws of the game, exactly as they are written today? Or is this the clearest possible sign yet that those laws urgently need to change before technology this precise quietly takes something essential away from the sport itself? Drop your verdict in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe to the Soccer Reporter for every World Cup 2026 story, the goals, the controversies, and the moments that make us ask what this game is actually supposed to be. I will see you in the next one.